Button.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our fourth and final town hall meeting for our September 8th bond referendum. So we're real excited here that we're continuing this conversation. Looks like we have a few guests, so thank you for joining us. So today's meeting is pretty straightforward. The first thing, if you have questions, you have a chat pane, please add them in the chat pane. Patricia and Chris will take a look at those questions and ask them at appropriate times so we can vet all of the questions from all of our audience. Tonight's meeting will be in 4 sections. The first section will obviously just be a general overview. Many of you already know really what's going on, but just in case we have people on that have not tuned in or have not done any research, we want to make sure we start right from the front side here and give them all the information that they will need to make an informed decision. The second, third, and fourth parts are really just scopes of work being done at Cornell, Woodside, and the high school. So in between each of those 4 pieces, we will be stopping and taking questions and answering questions. And then at the very end, we will also do the same for some general questioning. Please make sure that the questions are pertinent to the bond referendum. I know in our last town hall, we had a few questions that didn't even relate to that. And so we want to make sure that we're asking questions directly related to that. If you have additional questions beyond that, please feel free to call me here at the district office. I'm glad to talk with anybody about any topic. But tonight's meeting really is focused on the bond referendum, September 8th. So I'm going to continue with the agenda here. The agenda is really just, I want to talk a little bit about why this is important for Saydel. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is really doing great things for our district. And so we really do believe that, you know, we're really trying hard to improve our facilities, improve the culture, improve our communities. And the one way we do this is through our schools, our programs, and our services for our kids, our future. And so behind all of that, conceptually, this is why we're doing what we're doing. And there's a lot of other reasons that we're doing what we're doing just to make sure that we keep ourselves viable and sustainable, and which I'll get into in a moment. I'm going to go ahead and open up the PowerPoint. Can everybody see the PowerPoint okay? Patricia, could you give me an okay on that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So in getting started, again, let me just welcome everybody. Again, this is September 3rd, our town hall meeting. It's our 4th and final meeting. Whoops. So I want to go back, and I know many of you have heard this already, and some of us are probably getting tired of hearing this, but we really do believe that this is a win-win-win. It's a win for learners, it's a win for taxpayers, and it's a win for schools and community. So it's a win for learners because we're modernizing learning environments on all campuses. I'll talk about it in a moment, but we currently have about 28% of our classrooms and our learning spaces renovated. With the bond referendum, our goal is to hit 70%, which is a very lofty goal, and we're very confident that we can reach that. Possibly, if bids come in favorably, we might be able to even go beyond that 70%. We are looking to increase safety and security on all campuses, which is a huge component in today's modern world for education. And then lastly, we have a heavy focus on performing arts on all 3 campuses, which we'll talk about in those scopes of work at each of the buildings. Next, it's a win for taxpayers. We are looking to ask for this bond referendum coming up with no tax increase. Again, let me repeat, we're not asking for a tax increase. We are really confident through working with Piper Jaffray, who's our financial experts. We've already taken a look at what this looks like over the next 20 years, and we're very confident that we can keep our taxes status quo. In other words, no increases. And let me just kind of back up a minute with our taxes. We are in the lower quartile in the state. We have very low taxes, and we're blessed to have them due to our great valuation. But nonetheless, again, we are in that lower quartile. In the metro area, which Patricia will probably go over here shortly in a separate presentation, we're actually the lowest in the metro area. So again, we're very proud of that, and we're very blessed to be able to do that. But again, that's what's left us with very low taxes, and we would like to continue that. We want to make sure that we're fiscally responsible. And taxpayers win because we avoid the piecemealing of projects over the next 20 years. This has the potential to save taxpayers $3 to $5 million in the long run. And then lastly, taxpayers win because we, again, are avoiding increasing taxes. And that's really a big push. The bond referendum secures that. It helps the board from raising those taxes. If the bond does not pass, it's highly possible and likely that we would have to look at tax increases to cover costs of trying to put this together, which we still think is very, very difficult in terms of piecemealing and nearly impossible, which Patricia will go over in her part of the presentation. And then schools and communities win. As part of the comprehensive master plan, you know, we're looking to go from that 28% to 70+% with this bond referendum. That's a win for learners in modernizing the learning environments to a more 21st century type of learning environment. Those of you that are out there employing people, young people, the workplace is a very different place. And so we're trying to adjust our learning spaces to reflect more of what they're going to see in the workplace with our graduates as they go out into the real world. And then increase the longevity of our facilities, or we lengthen the life, which again increases our sustainability as a district over time. We all know that we have districts to the north, the east, and the west, and even the south that are highly marketable. And so we have to make sure that we sustain ourselves as a district by keeping up with our facilities and managing them for that sustainability. Again, we market our district for increased enrollment through facility improvements. And those of you that are really aware of how housing markets work, a strong school district attracts people to the area to actually move, which helps us in terms of valuation and helps us in terms of taxation. But it also helps us from an enrollment perspective, which is what everything is driven off of for school budgets. And then lastly, we provide learners and communities with additional community spaces, student union, cafeteria, and multi-purpose spaces for modern learning. The bond referendum has three basic focal areas. Again, we've talked about modernizing learning environments. We know that's an important piece for the future of our graduates. Increase safety and security, which is extremely important in today's educational environment. And then increase investing into our performing arts. So we're going to go ahead and slide right into this first part, which is really about the dollars, what this is really about. And then we'll stop here and we'll pause here for questions. Just a reminder, if you have questions, please post them in the chat plane as we're going through the presentation. So we are asking on September 8th for a $22.9 million bond referendum. We're asking our taxpayers and our voters to approve this. Keep in mind, state statute requires a supermajority. That's 60% of our voters to give us permission to do this. Again, we are doing this without raising taxes. If we just need your permission to go out and incur this debt so that we can go ahead and do these great things for our community and for our schools. So how's that money being spent? So 51.1% is being spent at the Saydel High School. That's $11.2 to $11.7 million. Woodside, which we've done a ton of work to over the past few years, gets 19.3%, which is $4.2 to $4.4 million. And Cornell is getting 29.5%, which is $6.5 and $6.76 million. So that's the basic breakdown of how that money will be spent. So this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Currently, we have 28% of our classrooms and learning environments that have been renovated. And I might take a moment here to talk about our master plan. Our master plan was worked on, and it took great lengths with many different constituency groups participating in developing the master plan, from community members to parents to students, teachers, administrators. This all happened back in 2014. And so since then, and we approved the master plan in early in 2015. Since then, we've approved, since 2012 actually, we've improved 28% of those learning environments. We'd like to take a big bite out of that and try to bite off, with the bond referendum, 42% of those classrooms to take us to that 70% of classrooms being renovated. Also, by 2030, we'd like to go ahead and continue to develop until we get to 100%. Our goal in 10 years is to have 100% of our classrooms updated. So the biggest question that I've been getting when I knock on doors, and just so we're clear, I've knocked on literally hundreds and hundreds of doors across our district and talked to people about the bond referendum. Hang on one second, I'm gonna move this out of the way. Sorry, everybody, just give me a second. So the biggest question is how do we afford a $22.9 million bond referendum without raising taxes? So first of all, on the left-hand side, you see just a bar graph. And what that represents is since 2015, you see our tax rates, which fall between $12 and $13. At this time, we have tax rates at 12.59, which they have been for the past 3 years. And so we are looking, and again, we've already worked with Piper Jaffray, who are financial experts for schools, and they've actually projected this out all the way through the 20 years and are confident that we can maintain that. This graph really just projects it out to 2025 to prove the fact that we are indeed able and capable of continuing with the current levels of tax rates and not increasing them. So again, we're in this great spot because we've been fiscally responsible. We've paid debt down, which gives us the capacity to invest without increasing the total tax rate. The best way that I can explain this is like in your homes. When you pay debt down, you have the ability to borrow and you have the ability to incur additional debt, refinance, and then still have the same payments. And that's really what we're trying to do here. We're basically saying, hey, we've paid down. If you've grown your family by 2 or 3 kids and you need more space, you need probably some other equity to build that addition for your house. That's all we're doing here is we're saying, hey, we have some improvements to make. We're not raising taxes. We just need your permission to go out and incur the debt. Prepaying bond debt has saved taxpayers almost $1 million. And so we've done a really nice job prepaying bond debt when we have the additional funds to do so. And again, at the tune of $1 million of savings. So anytime that we have additional dollars, we want to make sure we throw them at our current debt, just like you would do at home to help pay that down faster when possible. The bond referendum avoids piecemealing projects, which are estimated to cost taxpayers up to $5 million more over the next 20 years if we do not pass the bond. We've kind of already reviewed that. I'm going to talk about how that's possible and how we got to that $5 million in the next slide. And then by passing the bond referendum, we absolutely avoid any possible future tax increase. And the board is very committed to keeping those taxes low, which they are right now. Our taxes, again, we're just blessed to be able to keep them this low. If you go to the north, they're quite a bit higher. If you go to any district around us, they're quite a bit higher. So again, we're blessed to have the low tax rates that we currently have. And then back to what this is about, investing into our community. We build a culture and pride in our community through our facilities. Learners benefit from our investment for the next 20 years as opposed to waiting to year 18 or 19 to see any benefit, with any type of piecemealing. We increase our sustainability and longevity of our district, and we increase our ability to market to our community for our district. All right, so how does that actually happen? There's a question about, you say we're going to save $3 to $5 million. What does that look like, and how did you come to those dollars? So how we save the money is we buy construction in bulk, and there's just this greater efficiency and economy of scale. In other words, when we do multiple projects at the same time, we get greater efficiencies and economies, better pricing, and so we save money. It's kind of like when you go down to Sam's and you buy in bulk, you get better pricing for your groceries. And much is the same way with construction. We avoid remobilization costs. Every time we have a company, a contractor come here to do work, we have to pay all those remobilization costs all over again. And so those do accrue to quite a substantial amount. And by doing your projects in bulk, you avoid that. It's kind of like if you have a repair person come and repair any appliance in your house, you are paying a service cost or a trip cost. The same is true here. Every time they mobilize, we're paying for that cost. If they're here and they're doing multiple projects, you pay fewer remobilization costs, which again saves us quite a bit of money. And then larger projects have a greater potential for energy savings and rebates. We all understand that, if my refrigerator that's 20 years old goes bad and I replace it with a more efficient one, that piece of equipment saves me dollars. And just so we're clear, those dollars that are saved actually go back to the general fund, which then we can pay for teachers out of, which is a fantastic leveraging because we do pay for all our utilities through general funding. And so again, anytime we can do that, it's a benefit to the district. And then we avoid the negative effects of inflation. There's talk about a 3% in terms of inflation. I would bet and argue that it's much higher than that, but we're using a very low conservative number for our figures. So what does that look like on $1 million project this year, 2020? If we were to wait until 2030, that's 10 years, 3% a year would cost us another $350,000 on that money. And so the reality is it's going to cost us quite a bit more money to do those projects. I'm going to stop here for a moment. And Patricia, can you check the chat plane to see if we have any questions at this time?
We do have a couple of questions that have come in.
Okay.
Let's start with, how do you plan on updating all classrooms in 10 years? Once this bond runs out, where would the money come from?
That's a very, very good question. And so what we've done is we've been extremely strategic in what work we have left for the district to accomplish in the last 10 years. And what we've done is we've said, okay, so we know we can't afford this by piecemealing. And so we know that has to go into the bond referendum. And so as we talk through some of the projects that are in each of the buildings, I can kind of point a few of those out after the video segments. And I know Art could probably do the same as well. But make no mistake about it, we have thought that through in terms of, we know that we can accomplish these small bites after the bond referendum each of our summers for the next 10 years and get this done. But again, we were very strategic in planning that out to make sure it was still doable by choosing the big bites to happen within the bond referendum. Art or Eric or Lila, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yes, so I'll weigh in. This is Art with HALA. The overall master plan identified about $30 million worth of need, give or take or so. We obviously were looking at the finances, you, me, and Patricia, several months ago, and identified that, without raising taxes, we could look in that $20 to $22 million range. And so that leaves another $10 million worth of work to happen over the next 10 years, of which, we've been doing about $1 million to $2 million, depending on any given year, through PEPL and Save Dollars. So that's really our kind of overall goal, is to tackle, that 20 to 22 million as part of this bond referendum, and then spend that $1 million to $2 million over the next 10 years in PEPL and Save Dollars to finish out the master plan, that $30 million of total need across the district.
Okay. Thank you, Art. Okay, next question, please, Patricia.
Follow-up question to that. In 10 years, wouldn't these classrooms be outdated?
So just a very straightforward response to that is, we have classroom spaces, learning environments that have not been updated or been given any serious renovations since the 70s and the 80s. So renovations and updates do last much longer than 10 years. So they would still be in very good shape in terms of the other rooms and the other spaces that have been renovated or updated. And that might be another one, Art, if you want to chime in on that, or Layla.
Yep.
Or
Yep. Another point of the master plan, and this was brought up from day one, is that any updates that we do, we want to be very flexible, so that they can be updated easier in the future. And so something that looks like is, from a practical standpoint, is like from a technology standpoint, that there is no front of the room per se, that can be changed around, as well as introducing flexible furniture and flexible whiteboards, just making the overall spaces flexible, so that in 10 years, when teachers are teaching in a different style, that their classrooms can be modified quickly and efficiently, without having to have a kind of a fruit basket upset like has happened in the past. So that's a very intentional part of what we've been doing for the last several years with classroom updates, and we would see in the future as well.
Absolutely. And I would add to that, Art, with the master planning, one of the beautiful things that is happening is that we are adjusting how we're utilizing buildings, the layout, the flow, making sure that we have the right learning spaces in the right locations. That doesn't happen with a simple renovation. That only happens through some major upgrades through something like a bond referendum. So I think by having the master plan in place and getting everything in the correct location in terms of that flow of the building, I think really is a great benefit, so that in the future, we don't have to spend as much to make those moves. The student union is a really good example of that with the cafeteria and student union area. We're just not able to pull something like that off, in any given year without a bond referendum. So I really appreciate the master plan, the thought, the comprehensiveness of that as we move into the next 10, 20 years, because I think it's going to actually save us a lot of dollars as it relates to trying to renovate those spaces in the future if we do not pass the bond. All right, Patricia, next question, please.
Yep, we've got a couple that kind of go together, so I'm going to try and summarize these together.
Okay.
Why are we only trying to get 22.9 million if that will only achieve 70% of the classrooms? Why don't we just ask for the 30 million or whatever that number is to take it to get everything done to 100%?
Great question. There is a balance in here. We did take a look at what we had the capacity to go ahead and incur in debt without impacting taxes. In other words, we were very, very cognizant to say we can reasonably ask and incur this debt without impacting taxes or increasing taxes. Don't get me wrong, I would absolutely love to get to the 100% sooner, but I also even more did not want to increase the taxes to help benefit our taxpayers and our communities. And so that really helped us to determine what the scope in terms of amount of dollars we could go after here. And then that really did translate and equate to what we could actually accomplish, which then gave us that 70% benchmark. So again, it really was about maintaining a solid tax rate, making sure that tax rate doesn't increase and we keep that low.
Okay. Another one to follow up on that. Is this really a smart time to acquire such debt in this state of economy? Please explain.
Absolutely. And this is one too, Patricia, maybe you can help with, and Art, I know you have some thoughts on this as well. We thought a lot about this as a board, and the question really came down to, all right, so we've got this COVID going on, this pandemic. Do we move forward? Do we hold off on it? And this, how we really looked at it was, COVID, as serious as it is, and we certainly hope that it passes sooner than later, but we still have business to run. And we know that this is temporary. And so our buildings don't stop aging. Our facilities don't stop, deteriorating. And so we understand that even though it's a funny time, it's temporary and we'll get through this. So post-COVID and our pandemic, we wanted to have a solid plan in place to continue to do great things for our community, to continue to keep everything updated. Because again, our roofs, they just don't stop aging out. They don't stop leaking. We still have work to do. So nonetheless, we decided that it was the right time to continue to move forward with that. Art, is there anything you want to add, or Patricia?
Yeah, I can add a little part. The economy is still doing rather well, in terms of the overall economy. We have seen construction is on the decline a little bit. But this does remind me of 2008 a little bit. We had the recession back then. And just a little anecdotal piece, the Ballard School District, just north of Saydel, between Ames and Ankeny, they went after a bond in 2008 for about $22 million to build a new high school. The downturn happened, the recession happened, and they were able to build a $22 million high school for $19 million. They were able to essentially invest another $3 million into elementary schools that they had not planned on because of the economic downturn. We are absolutely by no means, hoping for an economic downturn that has all kinds of negative effects across, the economy and the market. So we're not looking forward to that by any means, but there are some benefits from a construction standpoint in that you can potentially get more bang for your buck if this is going to be an economic downturn. So just some food for thought.
The other thing that I would add is that construction costs and inflation, that never goes down. And so you can wait, but nonetheless, you're only going to pay more later. And so in the end, it still is a savings to continue to move forward now, and it still is the fiscally responsible thing to do. All right, next question, please, Patricia.
Is it wise for us to be teaching our children to take out large debts and make another generation pay it back?
So I guess we're not teaching our children to incur debt in a negative way. The reality is we're making a very intentional request here from our public. And everyone knows that, nowadays it's very, very difficult to go out and purchase a home without some type of debt. So again, we're not trying to teach children negative behaviors at all. Matter of fact, I would probably argue that we're actually trying to teach fiscally responsible behaviors. We want to keep tax rates low, and this is the hardest part that we want to keep telling and talking to our community about. It does seem counterintuitive that by incurring this debt, we can actually keep our tax rate low, but that's exactly what we're doing. Our intention is to keep taxes at a low rate in which they currently already are. Again, without the bond referendum, it's highly likely that we may not be able to keep them at that low rate. And again, that's what we're trying to prevent and trying to avoid. So I might challenge that in terms of, are we teaching negative? I don't think so. We're actually trying to be fiscally responsible, and I think that's a positive thing.
I'm going to piggyback on that, Todd. So this is Patricia Townsend. I'm the Director of Business Services for Saydel. And we've, whenever possible, keeping our tax rate the same made it so that we can prepay our debt within the existing resources that we have in that debt service levy. So for example, Todd already said, we've been able to save $977,000 of interest that we originally would have paid on the debt that was incurred in 2013, which was originally scheduled to be paid off in 2033. And right now they'll be paid off in 2026. So we do look for opportunities even after the bond to make it so that we can be as fiscally responsible as possible.
Real quick, Todd, I'll build on that too. So the district has the ability to pay down debt early and save on interest. The district does not have the ability to pay down inflation, does not have the ability to pay down extra trip costs and mobilization fees. You cannot avoid those if you piecemeal this over time. You can avoid interest, and really at the root of this discussion, it seems, is the trade-off between interest and inflation over time. You have the ability to pay down interest, but you don't have the ability to pay down inflation.
Great point, Art. Thank you. All right, Patricia, any other questions before we get ready to move on?
We do have a few other questions. So if this bond is not approved, will we be able to pay the other two existing bonds down quicker, or do we lose money that is now being paid by taxpayers from this previous bond that we are looking at rewriting? I want to take this one if that's all right, Todd.
Yeah.
So we do currently have two bonds outstanding. One is the same type of debt we are looking at to borrow right now, which is called general obligation debt, and that is paid from property taxes with what's called a debt service levy. And we have a maximum of $2.70 under Iowa code without voter approval to increase that. And so we are nowhere near that. We usually run less than half of that rate in our annual debt service levy that is actually charged to the taxpayers. We will not be able to pay down our second type of debt, which is a sales tax revenue bond. That one we cannot pay down with existing debt service dollars. That money specifically comes from our sales tax, our saved dollars that we receive throughout the year.
Okay. All right. What other questions do you have, Patricia? Thank you for answering that one, by the way.
Yep. Can you address the question on how much money has been spent on passing this bond, including the last time when it failed? And I did actually get this one a few minutes ago, so I have this answer if you'd like, Todd.
Okay. Thank you.
Total cost that I could find from last year was about $5,000, and that included the amount spent by the district on printing materials and postage and the actual election cost that Polk County charges us. For this year, our cost will be greater than that. at least 10,000 is probably more like the number that we'll have for this year.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Patricia. And a lot of that obviously is due to some of the marketing, the printing and things like that. We've definitely increased the sheer volume of that. So that would be the result of those efforts.
And we'll also have 2 polling locations instead of 1.
Yep. Which doubles the cost. That's correct.
Correct.
All right.
Couple of these questions going to save because they actually tie to certain buildings.
Perfect.
I do have another question that I'll take. Doing some research on these bonds, other states have banned them and other organizations wish they wouldn't have taken these style of bonds out. So state to state, school finance varies significantly. So looking at how other states finance their construction could be misleading based on how their finances are structured. This is the most common way for Iowa to fund their construction costs because we really only have 2 ways to borrow money, either through loans against existing resources from either PEPL, which is a property tax, or from SAVE, which is sales tax, or to do this type of general obligation bond where we have a voter approval of 60% and then we borrow the money from the debt and issue debt service levy. Art, do you have any other comments on Iowa construction funding?
Sorry, I was on mute there. I don't have any other comments on Iowa construction funding for schools. You covered it pretty well there.
Right.
The only thing that I would add to that, Patricia, is that Iowa school funding, and I happen to know this, I was out in Colorado for quite some time, is nearly, they're extremely different than most other states. Most other states are ran more like a business model. Iowa actually runs a very, very different model based on Dillon's rule and law. We are only able to do what statute allows us to do, nothing more. Other states, they're allowed to do many other creative things as long as statute doesn't, really refrain them from doing that. So again, it's very, very different. It's almost opposite. And so it does tie our hands a little bit sometimes. Legislators have been talking about making adjustments to that for quite some time, but nonetheless, that's Iowa for you. We like to be a little bit different, particularly around education. All right, Patricia, are we ready to move on or do you have any others?
Yep, I have kind of 2 more general questions.
Okay.
Why was the Saydel communicator stopped due to cost, but when the bond was needed, they sent out one that was nothing more than a bond communicator?
So the communicator has not stopped. What we really did is we were trying to modernize. And what we did is we began doing more of an electronic communicator. And then anyone that wanted a printed copy of that, we offered that to them. And so we do have quite a few people, it's over 100 people that have asked for that hard copy, in which we mail that to them when we put those communicators out. So again, it was not stopped. And so why did we do it this time? Because we were still transitioning. We are actually transitioning into some new e-newsletter types of formats. And so it was just something that we went back to because we're still in that transition, at least for the first mailing. Again, it had no bearing on the bond referendum. So I understand what the question is getting to, but really it's about transitioning to that e-newsletter formatting.
Okay, one last general question for now. Is there any evidence to prove that new classrooms will help our districts improve our reading and math scores? I feel this is where we lose more kids to open enrollment rather than the paint and the flooring.
Absolutely. So there's quite a bit of research out there, and I know, Art, you've talked quite a bit about it, but the research out there is, number one, when people have more pride for their facilities, for their schools, we know that creates impacts, positive impacts on achievement. We know that when we modernize learning environments to a more 21st century style of environment with furniture, room layouts, design, we know that teachers teach differently, learners learn differently, and that usually goes to a positive impact on overall achievement. And so again, there is quite a bit of research out there that talks about how that is impactful for the learner. And again, those are types of things that we think about every single day. Think about it like a business that you might go to. You're more likely to go to a business that is clean, that keeps their facilities up well, you're more likely to give your patronage to those businesses. The same is true for learning. We also attract people to our district. And I truly meant it when I said it's a marketing aspect of who we are. We bring people to our communities to live, and that results in increased enrollment, which helps us with our sustainability and longevity. Anything else anyone on the panel wants to add to that?
Yes, I just shared one link of many, and I'll, as we continue on, I'll try to post a few more on daylighting and acoustics and their impact on learning. Daylighting especially has shown to improve test scores and reading comprehension as much as 20% in schools that provide natural daylight. And Saydel schools, a lot of interior classrooms got covered up when media centers infilled courtyard spaces. So classrooms that used to have daylight no longer do. Also, in the 1970s, there was a number of skylights throughout the district. However, the 1970s skylights were very different from skylights that we see today. They leaked, they were not energy efficient. And so a lot of them were covered up in the 70s. This bond referendum, we would be looking to add windows or daylight into any and all classroom learning spaces that we are impacting. And so, you know, when asked if, you know, we are looking at improving student test scores, we are looking at ways that we can do that through the building. So as I mentioned, I'll post a few more links to, you know, scholarly articles. This isn't just, you know, industry people telling you that you need to put more windows in your spaces. These are actual studies done by, you know, people who are studying this day in and day out.
Art, I might add to that, and it's just a personal comment. You know, some of those interior spaces that were designed without lighting are a negative side effect of the piecemealing that we keep trying to avoid. Oftentimes, without a larger overarching master plan, you end up with some of these negative impacts, such as classrooms that don't have any windows or any natural lighting. So again, it's just another testament, another reason why we want to be really, really thoughtful through that master planning process with any work that we currently do to the district. So again, I just want to make that quick point. Patricia, I think what we're going to do here, and you may have an additional question or two. I think we're going to go ahead and start the first school and talk about the scope of that school through the video that Art and I put together a while back. And then if we have questions in between and or lingering questions, we'll take them at the end as well. All right. Give me a second here. All right, so for this first video that we're going to show, we're going to talk about the high school. And I will be honest, this video is about 8 minutes long. It's a little bit longer than the other two. The others are much shorter. So we'll go ahead and get it started. If you have questions referring to the high school, please go ahead and put them in the chat plane and we will stop and answer those questions once we finish up with this segment. Here we go.
Plan. And now we'll talk a little bit about
Patricia, can you hear that okay? I just want to do a sound check.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
what updates came. You know, a master plan is an ever-changing and evolving document. It's meant to give the district some rails to run on, but it did require some updates because needs changed from 2015 to 2018 and 2020. So we did update it. And this forms the basis for the bond referendum ask coming this fall. So we'll go ahead and start here at the high school and we'll work our way through Woodside as well as Cornell. But here at the high school, the main thing that we'll be accomplishing with this bond referendum is a major expansion of the fine arts program. It's a new band rehearsal, choir, small ensemble, instrument storage, as well as a backstage addition for stagecraft and construction and theatrical storage there on the northeast side of the building. We also have a 2 classroom addition. These will be math classrooms, and this is in response to a desire to improve some achievement in those math areas, which is a need for the district. And then a major renovation of several spaces throughout the building, renovation of the auditorium, as well as the cafeteria would have a very large commons remodel and expansion. The media center would also have a significant remodel and expansion. And then with the band and vocal vacating their existing wing, this provided the opportunity to renovate it into a multi-purpose room and wrestling room. This moves the wrestling from its current location, which is kind of in a remote part of the west side of the building, to be closer to the performance gym, and to create a true blue multi-purpose classroom there. And then last but not least, a renovation of that existing locker room and wrestling room space to be a student services suite with IJAG and success and credit recovery, as well as a new guidance office and suite there. As I mentioned, back a few slides. So a little bit more in depth, at the high school, we would have a new band room, a new choir room, a new ensemble room, instrument storage, theater and backstage addition, and that math classroom. We have a view here, this is kind of coming from the northeast, looking southwest of the new addition, there for the fine arts, and then the new addition blends in well for the math classroom there. An interior rendering here of the interior of that band rehearsal room. So very exciting space. The existing space that the band students are in has remained relatively unchanged since the 80s. It had a light renovation, but before that it was the original 1960s construction. So definitely well overdue for some updates there. We are also proposing some auditorium renovations. The first would be to add roughly 118 seats at the tiered seating area at the back. This will increase the capacity of the auditorium by about 25%. We'll be adding braking and motorized control of the rigging system for lighting and rigging. This is a safety feature to prevent the lighting and rigging from crashing down. So that definitely something that is long overdue. Replace sconce and stage lighting. A lot of the original lighting in the auditorium is, you can't get parts for it, you can't get lamps for it anymore, so we want to upgrade that to be more modern lighting. Replace the soundboard, which is in dire need of replacement, and then some other minor finish things like replacing worn carpet in the auditorium. As I mentioned, with the band and vocal and ensemble moving out of their existing space, we wanted to reuse that space and be cost conscious in how we do that. So this is a full gut renovation of that area to be a new multi-purpose classroom and wrestling room that can be used year-round. An adaptive reuse of that existing space, as I mentioned. And this will provide new opportunities for active learning and community engagement, everything from yoga classes to dance and cheerleading practice and other kinesthetic and active learning opportunities for students as well as the community. The cafe commons. So if anybody has been in the cafeteria in the last few years, you'll recognize that it is a very cramped space during and very loud during the school day. This expansion would increase the dining capacity by a significant amount, but more than that, it would create a more efficient dining experience. We'll create a new food court serving concept on the west side of the cafeteria so that students can have more healthy lunch choices, but also move expediently through the lunch line. And then just the overall aesthetic of it is going to be more of a student union than a cafeteria, a kind of open and collaborative place for students to meet, to improve that school culture, pride, and develop relationships. So this is going to be a really exciting expansion and renovation of that, that kind of core of the school. Right next door is an equally exciting expansion and modernization of the media center to better facilitate collaboration and kind of bring Saydel's Media Center into the 21st century. And this will also double as a really fantastic professional development space for the teachers and administration after hours. So really exciting expansion of that zone as well. And then certainly last but not least, we are renovating 9 learning environments, primarily special needs with new finishes and technology. There's a number of spaces here on the east side of the Cafe Commons and Media Center that will be renovated. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the underutilized locker rooms and wrestling room on the west side of the building will be renovated to those student service classrooms, IJAG, Success, and Credit Recovery, which are currently in some smaller classrooms in the core of the building. They'll now be moved out into some renovated classrooms. And then the guidance office, which is also in the core of the building, will be moved closer to administration for office space up at the front of the building. Todd, did you have anything to add before we move on to Woodside?
No, just a couple of thoughts that I had. I know that some of the classrooms are the result of kind of a domino effect. You know, as we expand on that student union, that cafeteria area, those classrooms then are commandeered for that space. Hence, we need to go ahead and find additional spaces. That's why we needed to move those over to the new proposed area for the counseling area.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it also resulted in the 2 extra classrooms up here on the north, the 2 math classrooms up here. So we are maintaining the amount of classroom space, but we are, or the quantity of classroom spaces, but we are increasing the average classroom size with these renovations to better facilitate that active collaborative learning at all of them.
Okay, we're going to pause right here. And again, we promised that we would pause after each of the different buildings and the scope of work at each of the buildings to go ahead and take questions again. So Patricia, if you would take a look at the chat plane and start asking questions, we'll go ahead and answer them.
So I'm going to go ahead and ask this question. I know Art already did post a written answer, but it was just in the video. So why and how did the attention for the special needs classrooms change at the high school?
Okay. Patricia, did you say you had a response or you wrote one or?
Art already included a written response. I
Oh,
don't
yes.
know, Art, if you have more to add.
Yeah, no, I can just say what I said in the written response. The credit recovery, IJAG, Success classrooms, along with the guidance office, they're currently in the core of the building where we're looking to expand the cafeteria. For that cafeteria expansion to happen, we needed to move those classrooms out. And so we moved those to the front of the building where the underutilized locker rooms as well as the wrestling room are currently located. And that also puts the guidance office closer to the admin offices at the front of the building, which was beneficial. And then we also are renovating a number of special needs classrooms. Let's see, we have ELP, emerging bilingual, behavior development. I know I'm probably forgetting a few here, are also being renovated and expanded under the plans here.
Thank you very much, Art.
Okay, next, why is so much focus put in redoing the band and choir areas instead of general education?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And so one of the things that we wanted to make sure we committed to, we have fantastic programs for band and for choir, the performing arts. And to be very honest with you, sometimes a lot of attention goes to athletics, a lot of attention goes to other areas. And we felt at this time it was the right time to take a look at those spaces, which have not been renovated for quite some time now, and really invest in them. Those are programs that we're very, very proud of. They're very successful in our district. And so we certainly wanted to invest in those areas. Again, there was no preference in terms of, over something else. It was just time to commit and invest.
And Todd, this is Eric with Halo Architecture. And I might just add to that, you know, it's been really a pleasure to work with Eric and Michael in those departments. And you guys, Saydel really has a positive influence there, and teachers that are really fighting for their programs. And, you know, their ability to tune the acoustics of these spaces and improve the functionality is really going to benefit those programs and see growth, frankly, in those programs. And that's part of the effort here as well. Provide for that, the goals of growth that those programs have.
Thank you, Eric. And keep in mind that you'll see a theme around safety, around performing arts across all the buildings.
I have a follow-up too, Todd.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is Patricia, and ties back to the question about why are we only doing 70% of the classrooms?
Yep.
We knew that we couldn't do 100% and keep our same tax rate, which was one of our goals. So when we looked at what can we set aside over the next 10 years, one of the things we know we can do is we can renovate a couple of classrooms each summer, because that's what we've been doing the last couple of years. That's how we've gotten to where we are right now. So that is something that we know is manageable. Putting on an addition in order to cut out part of the middle of the building to include in the student union is not something that we can handle over a summer with our current capacity from our current resources. So we were really strategic about which items were part of the bond as part of the really big project and which parts we knew we could handle over time in small chunks.
And I know, Patricia, later we're going to ask you to explain that a little bit further in detail toward the end of the presentation today.
Yep.
Thank you. Other questions, or are we ready to move on?
There was a kind of a follow-up question here. Are we moving towards Saydel of the performing arts? Why has so much been focused on band and choir?
So absolutely. So we understood that those larger spaces in terms of performing arts, number one, you know, we get their successful program. It was an area we just identified that we wanted to go ahead and tackle based on the bond referendum because it was a larger chunk. We do have other rooms in the fine arts, for example, down the back corridor of the high school that we certainly want to get to. If bids come in favorably or as time goes on, those are next on the docket to be addressed in renovation. So we're very excited to do great things for all of the arts, but nonetheless, we have to take a look at what would fall into the bond referendum, those big bites, because those are simply things that we cannot tackle without the bond referendum. In other words, we can't tackle them in any given summer, as you eloquently pointed out in your response in the last question.
I've got one more follow-up piece to that from back when we did the master plan. The master plan, we compare all of your existing spaces to peer districts. We've worked with over 30 school districts throughout the state. So we compare, just from a space and feature standpoint, every one of your spaces to peer districts. Kind of how are you doing with all of your programs? We also compared it to some state standards for modern education, and your band and vocal spaces really at both the middle school, but especially at the high school, were pretty severely undersized from a space standpoint. And then also those spaces were aging. At the band vocal area at the high school, that building is one of the original buildings of that high school, and it only had a minor finishes renovation in the I believe late 80s or early 90s. So it's been a long time since it's been updated, and so that kind of formed the basis for having such a strong focus on the performing arts in this project.
Okay. Thank you, Art. All right, Patricia, anything else? Any other questions before we get ready to talk about Woodside?
Not specifically tied to the high school, so we'll come back to these questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So the next segment is really going to cover Woodside Middle School. It's about 6 minutes in length, so we'll go ahead and get that started.
All right, Woodside. Let me see. Zoomed in here a little bit. So Woodside also has some exciting updates proposed as well. Probably the biggest thing is that Woodside has received a bit of an enrollment bump from years past where there are 2 classes with essentially 5 sections each. So this necessitates the need for additional classroom space. We are proposing a 2-classroom addition on the west side of the school, along with an activity space to handle that enrollment growth. So this is definitely a very big need. Otherwise, we're looking at some private classrooms. And so these additions help keep that student to teacher ratio kind of in check so that we have appropriate class sizes. The other thing that we are looking to do is to create a safe, secure entrance addition down on the south side of the school. This would force visitors through the administrative areas before gaining access to the rest of the school. Right now, as you might recall, students or visitors to the building can kind of come in and then take off down either corridor before ever having to check in with administration. So this is a safety and security need that is being met by this addition. And then in terms of building renovations, last but not least, a major renovation of the band and vocal areas, which have not been updated since the early 1970s, and they're in desperate need of renovation to meet today's needs. And then a renovation of the behavioral development special needs classroom space just to the north of that in a similar area. And then in terms of site, one of the biggest changes here is that we're talking about at Woodside is a new bus loop that skirts along the west and north side. We'll get into that in just a moment. So as we mentioned, we have these 2 classroom additions. This is a definite need for due to the recent enrollment growth. This will also add 2 activity room additions similar to the 4th grade pod at Cornell. So this will be a great new addition to Woodside. Something that they haven't had really in the past is the ability to collaborate in a more active environment outside of the classroom. And then that safe, secure entrance addition is also going to provide us the opportunity to give a facelift to Woodside, which really hasn't had a facelift to it since the early 1970s in its original construction. So create a more modern and contemporary entrance, which will help increase student pride in their school and just give a fresh look to Woodside. As I mentioned, the bus drop-off loop is going to be a major undertaking here at Woodside to add a bus loop on the west and currently all buses at the school, which forces students to traverse through the buses to get
Being a little motion sick. And there's a lot of stoplights, haven't we?
it's a little bit of a safety and concern there with having students cross between buses. By moving the buses to the west and north side of the building, we're able to get students in and out of the right side of the bus correctly. This will also allow the school to have 2 separate parent drop-off lanes, effectively decreasing the time by about 50% that the pickup and drop-off process for those parents that are picking up or dropping off their kids would take. So 2 drop-off lanes for those, as well as a little bit of expanded parking there on the west. In terms of the band and vocal renovations, as I mentioned, these rooms have remained pretty much unchanged since the early 1970s. And the new renovations will not only update the finishes in that area, but we're also going to increase the functionality by demolishing several walls in between the 2 different classrooms to create a single shared space that's divided by an operable partition wall. Really excited about what these changes are going to bring for those band and vocal teachers in that area. I just have a small floor plan here. The behavioral development special needs classrooms directly north of that will get an exciting update to those classrooms for those students that are in pretty great need of better spaces. So, all right, anything else, Todd, before we move on to Cornell?
No, I think the exciting part about Woodside is we do have quite a few different pieces, I think, that will increase safety. That main entrance, I think that's a vital piece that has been necessary for quite some time now, to really make sure visitors are being funneled through a secured entrance. And then that bus lane, I think, is an extremely important piece for any parent who has driven through there, how frustrating and how time consuming that can be, as well as unsafe for students entering the building and being released from the building. So we're really excited about some of those increased safety types of pieces that we're throwing into the bond referendum. And so again, it's just a really great piece to add to the safety of our district.
Great, thanks.
All right, we're gonna stop here and pause and take questions again. So Patricia, if you would go ahead and check the chat plane and start firing away.
Yep. Wouldn't a playground give these kids sunlight? Is it true that the PTO has the money to install a playground at Woodside, but the district won't let them do it?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of that. Can you reread that, please?
Wouldn't a playground get these kids sunlight? Is it true that the PTO has the money to install a playground at Woodside, but the district won't let them do it?
Absolutely, that is not true. The PTO has been talking about it and has been setting some goals to go ahead and start raising money for that, but they do not have the funds to go ahead and move forward with that. I would say that we absolutely value any type of activity space, particularly outdoors. We are actually really interested in continuing to think through that for both Cornell and Woodside. And we've actually been in talks right now of how we can pull that off. It is not part of the bond referendum. It is not in the scope of what we're trying to accomplish here, but it certainly has not fallen off the radar. And it's certainly not something that we're not continuing to work on.
Thank you. That's the only Woodside specific question, so I'll hold the rest till the end.
Perfect, perfect. A couple of little thoughts here that I had on Woodside before we move on. One is about the middle school band vocal room. I just wanted to let everybody know that we have, since this video was recorded, we have met with those teams and we've actually made some adjustments to the plans. And so again, this is part of our refinement process. So what we just talked about here, you may see some slight adjustments being made for the current plans and some refinements based on the input that we're collecting from those teachers in those spaces. But I wanted to make sure that I threw that out because again, there were some adjustments that have been made. Art, is there anything you want to add to that or?
Nope, just basically the changes that had been made since that last video is that the room configurations are staying very similar to what they are currently. However, the concrete risers in the band room are going to be going away. That will make the space more flexible so that students can move around better. The concrete risers kind of are an impedance to that. And then also it's accessible for any students that have any mobility issues. So, but still gets a kind of a full gut in renovation, new finishes, and then make that space accessible.
Right. Also the introduction of natural light, which that space is really dark. It's more like a cave. So we know how important that is based on the research you just sent us. So
yes, there will be 3 new skylights in that space, retrofitted, similar to what we've been retrofitting in some of the classroom spaces throughout the district.
All right. Thank you, Art. All right. We're going to go ahead and move on to the scope of work at Cornell. I will kind of give a little bit of a predicate here. We're very excited about Cornell because as you can see by all the color on the map, this is the first building that we will be approaching 100%. And this was intentional. And I do talk about it later on in the recording, but we want to try to accomplish one full building. There are a few little spots that will be left to do, but it will be the first building in the district to be nearly 100% complete with renovations. So again, we'll go ahead and get started with Cornell.
So last but certainly not least, we have Cornell Elementary. Similar to Woodside, Cornell has had a bit of an enrollment bump in the last few years, which is great. We always like to see enrollment going up at Saydel, but it does create a need for some additional classroom spaces. So right now, similar to Woodside, Cornell is deficient by about 2 classrooms. And we had already been planning on, as part of the 2015 master plan, a 2-classroom addition. So this 4-classroom pod creates a dedicated pod similar to the 4th grade one right next door, to provide that space to maintain those student to teacher ratios and counts for the various grade pods. So and creates that flexibility within the school to handle that enrollment bump. Other renovations that are being undertaken would be a large media center renovation. It's actually moving the media center from the core of the school to a more centralized location, as well as activity and classroom renovations kind of throughout the building. We talked about that 4th grade, or actually, excuse me, this is the 3rd grade pod here. It will better facilitate collaboration with a new activity space and larger classrooms for those students. Like I said, we'll be moving the media center from its current location. It does expand slightly to better facilitate collaboration. An important piece too is the bathrooms directly to the, let's see, this would be to the east of the new media center space. Mm-hmm. These are the last restrooms that have not been renovated to be ADA accessible within the building. And so we'll be looking to achieve that at this time. And then the existing media center space, that would be a new collaborative activity space for kindergarten and 1st grade. So that's what the plans are there. To that point, these collaborative learning zones, we are taking advantage of spaces within the building that already have a high volume. They have pop-up roofs where we can bring in natural daylight up high through clear story windows. And so these would be really exciting collaborative zones. And after the renovations are complete, kindergarten and 1st grade, they will share this zone. I believe this is the 2nd grade pod will have its own activity zone. 4th grade already has their own activity zone, and 3rd grade would have their own activity zone. So all 5 grade levels for the Cornell would have that active learning zone. And then just a lot of classroom renovations as well. We'll be modernizing 15 learning spaces throughout the school building. This is updating carpet and casework storage, marker boards, tack boards, paint, ceilings, adding skylights where we can and where it's feasible, if there's not already a window in the space, just making those really great space across the district for all classrooms, trying to update all of those. So that I believe is the extent of work that we are looking at for Cornell. Todd, do you have anything to add here?
So yeah, absolutely. So Cornell is, and we're really excited about this, is one of the first buildings in the district that will be nearly 100% renovated after the bond referendum. So we're very excited to pull off a building that is completely modernized, making it more equitable for all learners across all learner environments. And so that was part of the plan, was to try to take a look at what buildings we could try to pull off. Since many of our families do join our district at a very early age, we thought Cornell would be the building that we'd try to get most of the renovations taken care of, hence hitting that 100% mark. We do have a couple of small spaces that will still need to be renovated by 2030, but nonetheless, we're approaching that 100% complete renovations at Cornell. So we're excited about that.
Great.
All right. So we're going to stop there. I'm going to go ahead and put this away here and get back to the presentation piece. And so, Patricia, what other questions have come our way since we've shown the video on Cornell?
Are any of these areas being renovated going to be lent out to other organizations such as Grandview?
Okay, you cut out there at the beginning. I couldn't quite hear the first part. Could you repeat your question again?
Yep. Are any of these areas being renovated going to be lent out to other organizations such as Grandview?
So currently we do not rent much out to Grandview. On occasion, they do rent our athletic facilities. But as of right now, they currently are not asking for any facility requests or usages of our building. Again, that's not something that we've thought a lot about. We do get requests regularly for different entities and different organizations to use different parts of our facilities, such as our auditorium, again, our athletic facilities. Oftentimes, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, they'll use different parts of our facilities, but we've always been open to that. We are a community building, and so we certainly want to be able to offer our spaces up when appropriate to do so. So I guess that's something that if they were to ask, we would consider it, but it's certainly not on the forefronts of our mind as we move forward with any type of project.
Okay, next question. If this bond isn't passed, I hear that taxes will go up, but won't they go down as we don't have debt we are paying down, as obviously you can't raise taxes 22.9 million a year to get this done?
Yeah, so to answer that question, no, absolutely. The idea of piecemealing is a very interesting one because it's going to cost us much more year after year to try to do these projects. And some of the parts of the projects are simply not doable. As we've already talked, the third grade pod at Cornell, we cannot pull that off in any given year. That's going to necessitate quite a bit more than we can pull off in any piecemealing. But if we attempt to do this, if we try to do this through piecemealing without the bond, it's going to require more revenues. And the only way that we increase revenues is through taxation. And so that's exactly why the taxes will go up. And again, we are trying to avoid that. And this is why we feel it's the most fiscally responsible thing to do is through the bond referendum to keep those taxes low where they currently are. So again, we're trying to avoid increases in taxes. And again, this is what we're trying to accomplish to benefit our community.
Todd, can you bring up the other slides, the tax data slides?
Yes, ma'am. Give me a second here. You tell me where you'd like to go and I'll navigate for you.
Just that first one would be great.
Okay, let me present. All right. Go ahead, Patricia.
So we talked about how Iowa school finance is kind of a different animal. We are structured so that dollars we receive come from certain places and they have certain uses. So each of these colors here is a certain use of dollars. So the green box over on the left, property taxes as well as state aid is what typically funds the majority of that general fund. That's where we pay for staff. That's where we pay for utilities. That's where we pay for ongoing operational costs. That is all within the general fund. The other pieces that we have property tax funding for are the management fund, where we pay for things like our insurance, the PEPL, which is the physical plant and equipment levy. That's one of the sources of capital project funding that we have. And then the other piece is that debt service levy. That's the part we can only use to pay for our debt, outstanding debts. And then we also have a 13.5-cent PERL, which is that voted levy for public use of the facilities. So the pieces that make up our property taxes, you can see debt service is a piece of that. But we know that by doing this construction work, we will have more operational efficiency for things like our utilities and our maintenance costs for our HVAC equipment. That will impact both our general fund and our management fund, which are both partially funded through property taxes. So there is an implication for getting this work done sooner rather than later to help maximize the use of the other funding sources that we have.
All right. Would you like to go to another slide or?
Actually, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, hang on one second.
And it goes along with another question I just got, so.
Okay.
So just looking at our historical tax rate, you can see that the tax rate's been very stable. It actually was a little bit higher in the past, and it's been extremely stable over the last several years. We plan to maintain that as we move forward.
Okay.
Going to the next slide, Todd.
Yes, ma'am.
And you can see this is the school tax rates across Polk County, and we have the lowest tax rate within Polk County. The only other school that is close is West Des Moines, and they don't have outstanding debt. Our rate includes our outstanding debt. So again, we have the lowest tax rate for school property taxes in Polk County. We did have a question about taxable valuation in some of our other sessions. So we did bring some information on that just to show that we do have growing taxable valuation in our district. So when people say, well, you've raised taxes, our the total amount that we are charging, right, across the entire district does go up, but we're able to manage our tax rate because we do have good valuation growth. So we can meet the needs of our student population. For example, we had student growth last year and we were able to manage that within our existing tax rate because of our valuation increases.
Patricia, a quick question. So this year I noticed a lot of people did see an increase in the amount of dollars in which they are paying in for taxes. We've made it very clear that that is not a result of school increasing taxes. That's a valuation increase, which comes from Polk County. And I think that sometimes the numbers don't always equate. And so I'm asking you this, and I apologize, I'm putting you right on the spot here. For 2021, we see an increase of valuation of 8.85%. I think people think that that's the amount of additional dollars we get. Can you explain that or talk just for a second about that?
Sure. So Polk County is, each of the counties are assigned the task of figuring out what the valuation, both the total and the taxable valuation are within the structure of the state. So again, that comes from the county level, not from the school. There are also other pieces of your property tax rate, like the county assessment, the hospital assessment, things that are not tied to the school district's rate. So the only thing the school can manage is our tax rate, and there are restrictions on that as well. There are some pieces of our property tax rate that are tied, for example, to enrollment. There's some pieces that have a cap, like the debt service cap of $2.70 that I mentioned. So we do have restrictions even within that. So our goal is just to maintain that existing $12.89 however we can.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Just gonna go through a couple more questions we got.
Okay.
Isn't saving money to spend on projects smarter and better calculated than to borrow? And I want to take this one if that's all right, Todd.
Yeah.
So the dollars that we have for our debt service levy can only be used to pay for debt. We cannot save those dollars over time and then pay for projects. The only way we can get that construction where we need those significant dollars we don't have on a year-to-year basis would be to spend the debt service levy dollars on debt that we have outstanding.
Okay. All right, what other questions do you have?
So without debt, our taxes could actually be the lowest in the metro. They already are the lowest in the metro. So even with our outstanding debt, we're still the lowest.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting one because I hear things about, our high taxes, and to be very honest, we're in the bottom quartile across the state. We are very fortunate with our valuation to have these low tax rates, and that's definitely a benefit to our community. And our goal as a board is to do nothing more than to keep them low as opposed to increasing them. And so again, we're trying to commit to that. We're trying to honor that. Even if the rhetoric out there is that taxes will go up. We're telling everybody, no, taxes are not going to go up with a bond referendum.
Okay, next question. We need a superintendent that is vested in our community. What is your promise and commitment to our school? Building a new house and moving on in 2 to 3 years, just like the previous.
I see. So those of you that know who I am know, number one, that I'm invested 100%. And again, I don't move to a community and try to invest myself into a community without being completely in terms of my heart. And so, as I've mentioned in the last town hall, this similar question came up. I want people to know that I'm committed to this district. I'm committed long-term to this district. And again, that's all I can say. And those of you that know me know that that I work very, very hard for the district each and every day, and I'm committed to that. So I guess the best thing that I can do to explain that is come visit with me, and you can just judge for yourself where my heart's at and where my commitments are at.
Okay. The last bond, we did a new football field and it hasn't changed the outcome of the football scores or translated to higher reading or math scores. So why would focusing on the band so much make any difference on those low scores?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I understand the question here and I understand the frustration there. Part of the issue, and I just want to be as gentle and as I can with this, because, you know, our kids are working very, very hard. Our coaches are working very, very hard, and I would never want to offend them in any way. Bottom line is that we are positioned for our size of school, we are literally one of the smallest schools that play in the class that we play. And when you do that, you're playing with schools that are much, much larger than you are. And so in knowing that, you do tend to have some higher level competition that can sometimes not result in the W's all the time. And so again, is there room that we can grow? Are there places we can get better? The answer is absolutely yes, and we're working to do that. I would also add in that successful athletics are not just a result of a football field. They're the result of a community's commitment to preparing people for competition from youth all the way through and having consistent programming. And so that's the goal. We have a new athletic director this year, and that's the charge that I set in front of him, is to build those youth programs so that we can be more competitive. And the idea is that I'm not after the wins as much as I'm after the development and just being able to compete at the same level. The wins will take care of themselves. And in the end, the last thing that I would say is we are working to develop good people. We are looking to develop skills in people that they can carry with them throughout their lives. I was an athlete in high school. I wrestled and played football. I was above average in wrestling, but I didn't win every single match. But the things that I learned there, I have carried with me through the rest of my life, and I'm currently using them right now. That's the goal for those types of programs. I wish I could say it was because I won so much, but that's simply not the case. And so we want to go beyond the wins and the losses. So I certainly hope that our community understands that. We're continuing to grow. We're continuing to identify areas that we can improve upon. And we're not perfect, but we're working to improve each and every day.
Okay, one more question.
Okay.
How many years can you promise no tax increase?
So as I've mentioned before, we have had Piper Jaffray, who is an expert financial company that works with schools each and every day. They are people that take a look at our capacities, where we are with our budgets, and they basically play that out and project that out for the next 20 years. They're the ones that we go to talk to about what's our capacity, what types of building blocks can we put together to pull off a master plan, to pull off a bond referendum. We did figure things in a manner that would allow us some wiggle room to make sure that we can still manage with the current tax rate. We are very committed and we're very confident, based on our conversations with them, based on the data that they've provided us, that we can maintain those tax rates over the next 20 years. Otherwise, we would not be making that commitment and promise to our public. Patricia, is there anything you want to add to that?
I would just say, 2020 is a great example that we do not have a crystal ball to see the future. Nobody predicted all the different things that have happened in 2020. But we do have consultants that we talk to about finances, both for bonding capacity as well as just generic school finance kinds of topics. So we do look for the kind of, experts as to what we can expect. And we have a 5-year forecasting model. So, we're very confident as to what we can do over that kind of short and midterm. So that is what we use to try and make sure that we can, carry out that commitment of trying to keep the tax rate as stable as possible.
Okay. All right.
I have one more question. Why didn't a questionnaire get sent out to see where parents of students would like to see improvements done? I, as a parent, don't care about sports or band near as much as I care about the reading and math scores of all 3 schools.
Absolutely. So that goes back to our master plan development. So in 2014 and 15, there was a significant amount of work, and Art, you may want to chime in on this one, that went into developing that. And that did include literally hundreds of people for input. And so we want to make sure that people understand that if you did not take part in that, I understand you're wondering about that, but nonetheless, there were many, many different constituency groups and different groups of people that actually took part in that, from community to children and students to administrators and teachers and board members. So again, there were many, many people that took part in developing those master plans. Are we looking at the master plans and saying, wait a minute, maybe there's some adjustments to be made here and there? Absolutely. But nonetheless, there were quite a few people involved in developing that, in which we are trying to honor and follow through with today yet. Art, is there anything you want to add to that piece?
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head. We involved over 100 teachers, students, parents, board members at all 3 schools. Each school had its own dedicated workshop at the boardroom that invited parents. And then we met with teachers from every department and every building to talk about their spaces. And then we had lunch actually with students to talk about their spaces. These were at the high school, middle school level. They were some of the kids that were in student government. So we got their perspective and just got to hear, kind of an unfiltered look at what they wanted to see in their schools. And we go back to those notes often to see what the vision is for these spaces going forward.
Okay. All right, thank you, Art. All right, Patricia, is there anything else in terms of questions?
All the questions I have.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get ready to close the meeting out. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing here. In closing, number one, we just wanna make sure that we're being as transparent as we possibly can. We wanna make sure we create equity for all of our learners and not just have some students learning in renovated spaces and other students that are not learning in renovated spaces. We also wanna make sure we are informing our public, making sure that we're answering their questions, making sure that we're being as transparent as we possibly can. At a certain point, then we're asking that you trust us in our commitments to you as you go to the voting polls. The last thing that I would like to just encourage everybody to do is just on the 8th, September 8th, Tuesday, please go out and take a look at what your heart's telling you to support, our effort here. We certainly would appreciate that piece. But nonetheless, we encourage everybody to go out and vote and exercise your rights. You have 2 voting locations, obviously at the Saylorville Fire Station. The second one is at the Norwoodville Community Center. So please find your way to one of those areas on Tuesday to cast your vote. We're gonna go ahead and get ready to close. I wanna thank all the panelists today for chiming in and for helping out in terms of just the presentation and answering questions from our public. Thank you, everybody, and have a great evening.